So welcome back everyone, very quick video for you today. You would have seen the video, I believe very recently on the SL7 where I chopped down the fork. So I took the fork out of the frame obviously, put it in the vise in the holder, cut it nice and flush, refitted it, etc, etc. But 2 or 3 people have commented in the video, why don't you just cut the fork while it's in the frame? And I'll instantly dismiss it. You can't do that, definitely don't do that, very, very sketchy. And then I sort of sat down and thought about it for a few minutes and thought, actually, why can't you do that? So I'm going to try it. This is a scrap frame. So I'm going to try it just for purposes of seeing how sketchy it is, if it's actually possible, and whether it's a good idea or not. So let's have a go. What's the worst that can happen? So this is a scrap frame, it's just hanging on the wall. It's got a big crack in the top tube, so we're not doing anything bad to it. So it makes a good candidate for this little experiment. So yeah, I instantly dismissed the idea when people mentioned it, thinking, why would you want to do that? That's just crazy. But then thinking about it, it might actually work. So we're going to try it. So, for argument's sake, we're going to take out this spacer here, and then we're going to trim the fork to what that needs to be now. So we need to lose basically 3mm below the top of this here. So that's the plan. We're going to chop this down. So what we need to do basically, when you're measuring it, push it down there, make sure the headset is assembled properly, nip up one of these bolts very lightly, just so we can score this fork where you want it. So that headset is basically adjusted. There's a tiny bit of play there, but set it as it would be. So you need to take this expander out the middle first of all, if you've got one. This is purely for a carbon fork. On an aluminium fork, again, I've never considered it, I'll be perfectly honest with you. The thought's never crossed my mind, but if this works on a carbon fork, then yeah, I guess you could use it on an aluminium fork as well. I think it's just sort of semi-seized into this. The whole bike was basically seized when I bought this, so if it's just a little bit seized, put this bolt in here and give it a tap. There you go. There's a lot of corrosion in there. So I bought this frame as basically scrap, so just to play around with. So it makes an ideal candidate for this experiment. Plenty of corrosion in there, it's disgusting. I'm always up for learning new stuff, anything that's going to save time, so if this works then I may adapt it. Maybe not on a £13,000 bike where one slip of the hacksaw you've got issues, but maybe on a normal sort of bike, possibly. So what we're going to do is mark this steerer here, as per usual. I think this pick's getting a bit blunt, to be fair. So there's a line on there, so we can take this stem off now. First thing I'm going to do is just put a Velcro strap around here to stop it all falling out, because it's highly likely. On this bike the fork's going to fall out because there's no brake hose holding it on, but for the sake of this video let's pretend it's got a brake hose going down here and into the fork. So what we need to do is get room to put a saw guide on there now. Abbey Tools make a very nice one by the looks of it that basically clamps on here. And 2 bolts you could clamp it on rather than having to rely to be able to slide it on top. But I don't have that one and it's very expensive, but maybe I'll invest, who knows. So there's the mark that we put on there. So we need to mark 3mm, sort of 2-3mm below that. You don't want the cut fork to be flush with the top of the stem. It needs to sit sort of 2 or 3mm below that, so that's not the cut line. So we're going to go just over 5.5mm and put another line down here. So that's the actual cut line that we want. Okay. So this is a Park Tool guide that you normally put in your vise here and cut through there, cut the fork off with the fork off the bike. This is going to be just so sketchy. I mean, you can put it on like that and sort of cut it at an angle. You can already see the difficulty of this, can't you? So yeah, I mean, let's give it a go. But I have got another saw guide that's probably going to be more appropriate. I'll show you. But if this is the only one you've got, then it's going to be a challenge. And by the time it takes to disconnect your brake hose and pull it through, I could have already cut this fork off. I'll be perfectly honest with you. But then you've got to bleed the system, obviously. So there is pros of doing this if it's at all possible, but I'm still not convinced. Right. So that's going to be somewhere close. It can be very hard for me to actually line that up now to see where I'm looking through for this slot. That's the second difficulty. I can't see a thing. So you can already see how ridiculous this looks. I'm not going to use that, that's just crazy. I do, however, have this much smaller Bursman unit, so let's fit that instead, because this is just crazy. Right, so again, the first challenge is getting this slot here lined up with the mark here, because it's very difficult to see while it's in the stand. Let's see what we can manage. So the hacksaw blade will go in there. I already hate this method, but I'll persevere. Right, so that's going to be about there. Now, one thing to be aware of, this is not the fork, this is just a dummy fork, but your line that you've got here that you just scored on there, don't try and cut through the middle of the line, because the width of the blade is going to be bigger than that line there basically, so you'll be actually cutting off more than what you think you are. So make sure the bottom of the blade ends up at the top of the line sort of thing. So for argument's sake, let's say that's your line there. Don't cut down the middle of it. You want to cut so the bottom of the blade is just at the top of that line, and that will cut the correct amount off. So don't just cut right through the middle of your score line, because the width of the blade is going to be significantly wider than the actual score line, so you'll end up cutting more off. So don't do that. So that's it, basically set ready to cut now. So this is my main issue with trying to do it like this, is how are you supposed to hold this, because what you don't want to be doing is sawing the frame like this. So if I just use that for example as there, you know, it's just crazy. You don't want to be doing that. Obviously you can hold this to a certain extent, but I don't really want my fingers there. I can't hold that because it's spinning. I can potentially hold the fork a little bit, but it's just far from ideal. You know, if this is clamped in a vise where it should be, you've got all the control in the world. So that's really why I'm a bit sketchy as to do this. So doing that, and oh dear, I've just slipped and cut my £5,000 frame in half. You know, you just got to be really careful. So potentially we can clamp this frame somewhere a bit more appropriate. Obviously it's in the seat post at the moment where it should be, but you don't want to be clamping a carbon frame here. Just do it anyway. Alright, who's going to clamp the frame like that? Absolutely nobody. So even then, it's still not really helping me at all, to be fair. I can get in there a bit better. I can cut it, but it's not ideal. You know, I can do this, but all I'm doing now is dropping carbon dust and everything into the headset. So again, that's not going to be ideal either. So what you really need to do, I'm guessing, is tilt the frame down so that the dust is going to fall out the bottom of the cutter. And this is all fine and great if you've got a nice fancy work stand like this where you can move the bike to wherever you want, but if you've not got one of these, then it's going to be extremely challenging. And again, I'm still clamped on the top tube here, which we definitely don't want to be doing. Like I say, this top tube's already got a massive crack down the middle of it anyway, so I don't care about this bike, but for your £5,000 frame, definitely don't clamp it there, whatever you do. But yeah, it's just showing you the difficulty of this concept. This is a bare frame, obviously there's no wheels on there. If you got it on the ground, you can stand it on the wheels, but again, you're dropping carbon dust all down to the headset there, which is not great. Of course, you can put a cloth around there and try and minimise that, so let's do that. I could definitely have had this out, chopped it, and put a new hose back in by now, other than this, but hey. That's sort of best case scenario, unless your work stand handles in the way like this. This is just absolutely ridiculous idea. Sorry guys, but it's not for me. But I'm going to carry on for you. Jesus. Move it down a bit. Just right to the middle of the thinnest part of the frame, we'll clamp it there, yeah? Great. Alright, so that would be where you would start to cut there, basically like this. Like that. But before you do cut anything, put a mask on. Carbon's not very nice stuff. Obviously got gloves on, got safety glasses on. I'll put a mask on. You won't hear me talk, so I'll just cut it. Ridiculous. To be fair, this carbon blade is a little bit wide for this Bursman cutter, so I'm just going to put a normal blade in and carry on. So let's cut it off. Is it a clean cut? I don't know. I had to change to the a normal hacksaw blade halfway through because this Bursman cutter is not really designed for the wider carbon blade. The Abbey tool one is, the other part tool one is, but I say there's no way you're getting that part tool one on here. So yeah, I think probably you could do that, but this cutter's not going to be the best if you're using a carbon blade. You can cut it with a normal blade though. Let's take this guide off and see what we've got. It's not the worst cut in the world. So I use permanent grip tools, which are tungsten permanently bonded to this aluminium. It's a super flat plate, very nice tool, but very expensive as well. So I used to do a lot of work with carbon, so let's just file this off a bit flatter than this. Mask on. Wet and dry 180 just to tidy the top edge up. Okay, it looks fairly flat. Changing blades halfway through is probably not ideal. Like I say, it depends on the guide you've got. If you've not got a guide, well, you can use, some people use hose clamps. You can use an old stem as well, I'll show you that. This isn't an old stem, but it is a stem. It's the stem from this bike, so you can use that. Just line that up with your line and cut that off. That gives you a good sort of reference point as well. Like I say, use a scrap one because you're obviously going to mark the stem with the hacksaw blade. If you've got a stem, you can use a Jubilee clamp, hose clamp. Just tighten that around where you want it to. And that'll be nice and flat as well. So you could use that as a guide quite easily as well. You don't need a fancy thing, so we can use this. Let's go with this. I think realistically most people are going to have a clip like this, so I'm going to chop a bit more off this fork. Put your mask on. The problem with doing this is it moving in the headset here, so you can't clamp this headset down obviously because the stem etc is not in place, so this doesn't move within the cup, so that's kind of why you want it in a vise, in a proper saw guide. You probably want to move that around now because it's going to start to hit. You've already gone off centre here, look, you're already cutting through the actual clip itself. So that's why this is not going to be ideal. I mean, it's not a million miles away from where it should be, but I'm going to move this around so we're not cutting through this thicker part of the clamp. So the problem with these is forks are not, they're very expensive. Depending on some buyers, these might be £500–600. You know, you can get a sort of generic carbon fork for £200–300, but even then it's not going to match your paint. It's going to be the whole job's got to be done again basically if you're going to buy a new fork because you've got this wrong. So let's just finish this cutting here. It's off. Again, it's not the straightest cut in the world. It's probably worse than the other one, that's for sure. You can see it went off centre on that clamp. I guess you could be super careful and take your time. Obviously I'm trying to make a quick video on this, but if you've got sort of one go at it, then take your time, you might get it a bit better than that, but I much prefer a proper saw clamp in a vise. I don't know why this clamp came off, I took it off at some point, sorry. Maintain continuity for the video, I'll put it back on. Let's clamp it back in the seat post where it should be. Spin it around, right. So, what do we think? Can you do it? Yes, you can do it, you can definitely do it. There's not a lot of dust here. I'll put the cloth around there. Like I say, my main concern is where to clamp the frame. You can't really clamp it by the seat post and do that because it's just going to be all over the place. There's not a lot of room for some saw guides. The Abbey one, by the looks of it, would be ideal for this. Their website even shows you doing it like this in the picture. So that might be an investment, but you know, if you're doing it day in, day out, like a workshop, yes, an investment. If you're doing it a one-off job at home, you're not going to spend £130 on a tool just to chop a fork without taking it out. Just disconnect the hose and do the job properly. So yes, you can do it. Would I do it again? Not sure. Maybe if I invest in the Abbey tool one, then it might make it a little bit better. But it's just, it just makes me nervous how you're going to clamp a frame properly and prevent all this wobbling around basically. And it's difficult to hold it like this and get an accurate cut. You could see on the hose clamp one that I did, it already went slightly offline because you can't really clamp it. So yes, you can do it. Should you do it? It's up to you. I'm not going to make that a call. A lot of people do it by the sounds of it. I've always removed the fork from the bike and done it that way. Let's just quickly throw this back together. It's probably too short now because I cut that extra piece off, but like I say, it's gone in the bin anyway, so it doesn't matter. So there's two spaces. If you can put a half a width one on here, you'll be okay. There's not enough steer at the top there, so that's too short for that. So we need a half width spacer. Right, I've got a slightly smaller spacer here. So that's not too bad. It's still maybe a fraction short, but we need to put preload on the headset, which will probably put it up as well. But you're just going to mess around with the spaces you've got to get that right. What you want is basically the top of that fork needs to be above the middle of this bolt, but not completely flush. You need a little bit of a gap there so the cap can do its job. Otherwise this cap is basically going to bottom out on the fork. This one will be okay because it's fairly flush, but you do need at least 1–2mm gap there to get that back in. Just put this expander back in. I'm not greasing it or anything. I'll say it's going in the bin, so this is just for you guys. Torque that up a little bit. There's normally a torque rating written on here, about 5–6 Newton-meters. Drop the stem back in. So now you've got pretty much a 1mm gap there, so actually pretty good now. And that will just drop in there. Spin it around in here. And all this is doing is preloading the headset, so watch. That's tight enough. Okay, that is tight enough. Take this off, that is holding everything together. So if you had a handlebar and wheel fitted, obviously you could rock the brake on there. I can still feel a little bit of play on there, so I'm just going to give it a little bit more adjustment on this. This is all I'm doing. I've pushed it with one finger, and that should be more than enough. Okay, so let's just check that again. Right, there's zero play in that headset now, and you can see how tight I didn't do that. I keep going on about this because every single day I see people come in and they've rounded this bolt out because they've just gone so tight. You're doing it wrong, guys. You know, there's the torque setting you see in your expander plug is nothing to do with this. The torque setting for that is how much torque to set the expander plug. This doesn't have, normally, 99% of the time, this doesn't have a torque setting. I have seen the odd bike where they put one in, but it's just completely irrelevant figure because the only torque it needs is enough to preload the bearing like that, and that's it. I'm going to do it just to show you what you do, but people just keep going like this and keep going and wonder why the headset's not tight. I mean, look how tight that is now, and that's how tight I see these in the workshop. That is just ridiculous. You can feel every single bearing gripping around there. But if you've done it that tight and you still can't get the play out of the headset, your fork's too long. You bottomed out on this cap here. That's why you can't get the play out. So please don't do that. So if you've got a cap that has this lip on the inside, which most of them got some sort of lip, then all you're going to do then is bottom that out on this fork. I'll show you now. Just depends on your headset and stem setup, but generally speaking, this is what's going to happen. Tighten that up now. Oops. That's why I've got 6 5mm Allen keys on my stand. So I don't need to bend down when I drop one. So that's basically, that's tight as it will go, look. Really tight. And they're still playing that headset because the fork's too long. And that's the problem you're going to get. You can't see that, but I can feel that there's definitely play because this cap's bottomed out on that top of the expander. Just nip that up. And then it won't move when I take this out. So that's what's happened, is that lip there is bottomed out on this silver lip here. So it's not actually touching the stem, which pushes it down, which holds it together. So you're doing nothing. So once that's done like this, I'll show you as well. Tighten these up. Obviously we're torquing these to whatever it says on the stem, normally 6 Newton meters. Like that. The main reason this expander, some bikes it gives a bit of extra strength to the steerer, but really all that's for is for the top cap to actually thread into, and allow you put the pressure on. I'm not going to take it out, but just to prove a point. That's now out of the bike and that headset is still perfectly adjusted, doing nothing. Yes, it gives some expansion strength to a carbon steerer. Obviously you're never going to leave it like that, but just to show you the concept of what is actually, how this is designed to work, it's just literally to put pressure on the bearings, take the preload out of it, then these 2 bolts here hold everything together. So you don't need 55 Newton meters to hold the bike together on this. You need virtually nothing. All it's doing is setting the pressure on the bearing. Then we nip it up and then it's set. If you can't set the right pressure, your fork's too long, or you've assembled the headset incorrectly, or something else has gone pretty catastrophically wrong. So don't get confused with this. Okay, so can it be done? Yeah, it can be done. Would I do it? I'm still a bit unsure. Maybe with the nicer Abbey tool one, maybe it might be a better option, but the little Bearsman one, you couldn't fit the carbon blade in there properly, so it wasn't very good. So yeah, it's not brilliant, and you certainly couldn't fit the part tool one on there. You could see how just ridiculous it looked. For me personally, I think I'll just continue to remove the fork for the 5-10 minutes it takes. Some bikes it's a bit more difficult than that, some bikes it's literally 2 or 3 minutes. For me, I think I'll continue to do it by removing the fork from the actual bike itself, but is it an option? Yeah, I guess so. Is it still a bit sketchy? You decide. Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.